Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session looking at some Lord Mayor's shows. We're looking at 1561 and 1568. Some of the earliest Lord Mayor's show texts that we're looking at. They're not necessarily the most fulsome, as you may know from previous videos. We've looked at some of the earliest full extant printed versions of the Lord Mayor's show. The materials we're looking at are a little more diverse, but we do actually have some actual text of the what was spoken during the Lord Mayor's show, but we also have first-hand accounts and some accounts from the basic minuted how much it all cost, and we're going to sort of weave our way through that for these two Lord Mayor's shows. So it's the early doors in the reign of Elizabeth I, been on the throne a few years, and we're going to start dancing through what the Lord Mayors are doing at that time. So in the room we have Olga, we have Eric, we have Tom, we have Liza, we have Anna Rose, and we have Professor Tracey Hill, who has written Pageantry and Power, a book that we're absolutely not sponsored to mention anything about, but you know, the fact that it's really very helpful when looking at these things. Though technically for this this particular session, outside of the date of that particular work, but we're going to dig into this and find out how it works. And we're starting. We've got an incoming Lord Mayor, William Harper of the Merchant Tailors. Tracey, can you tell us anything about William Harper?
I can, yes, because the Merchant Tailors Company very helpfully in their book about the shows have put the files in for him. He was in Bedford, which is where he was buried as well. Born, God, this is doing weird things in my head. He was born around 1496. That's like the 15th century. That's like medieval, weird. Other than that, he's just a kind of pretty standard. When he came to London, became member of the Merchant Tailors, obviously the treasurer of St Mark's Hospital, which is kind of cool. And then worked his way up the ladder, was very wealthy, owned the family hospital, which is up sort of Islington way, etc., etc. So yeah, 1496, I love it.
Yeah, it's from the reign of Henry VII. It's bless. So this is a pageant in St Paul's churchyard. We don't have necessarily that much about what else might be happening. We don't know whether there were more extensive devices at other stations, or at least we don't yet. I'm sure that this is perhaps it. But what we do have before we actually get even to that is we have a sense of how much everything cost. There may be some errors in this. Just beware. Everything's in pounds, shillings, and pence, and hopefully we'll get a sense of what it all was. So, in 1561, payment concerning the charges of the bachelors in the time of Master William Harper, Lord Mayor-elect, against he took his oath. The payments include, and I'll ask Liza and Eric to alternate lines, please. So one line at a time of what people are paying for.
Eric, do you want to start?
I was going to go with the assumption of ladies first, but I mean, that's just me.
Liza, take it away.
Okay. 5 shillings to Cable, painter, for drawing a pattern of a pageant.
£3 to R. Drumslade and his company.
£5 to Scott, the painter, in part payment for the pageant.
26 shillings 8 pence to Evan Davis, porter, for him and his company, who carried the pageant.
12 shillings and 6 pence for a crown for David and trimming the regals and hire of Mr. Shobman to attend on the pageant.
£7 to Scott, painter, the residue of £12 for the pageant.
30 shillings to John Taylor, master of the children of the late monastery of Westminster, for his children who sang and played in the pageant.
2 shillings and 4 pence to porters for setting up the pageant in the frame in the gallery.
21 shillings to Mr. Moore for the hire of 5 harps and his child playing in the pageant.
£45 10 shillings to Ewan and to Nicholas Hollandby for their foist shot and powder.
£10 to Matthew Sharp for gunshot on land.
10 shillings to John Holt, mummer, in reward for attendance given to the children in the pageant.
16 pence for 2 pillars which are holding up the pageant, which is tied up to the rafters of the hall, and are to remain there for the same purpose.
And the total cost is £151, 14 shillings and 9d. There's a lot in that. I think I do love the 16 pence for holding up for holding up the pageant afterwards, that they display what they've produced.
No, I think those are stage supports.
Well, there's rafters of the hall, so I was wondering whether it's afterwards.
I think
that suggests
the pillars
inside to
are
me.
supporting the structure of the pageant that they've constructed in the hall.
They quite often had a ship hung from the ceiling of the hall with performers in it. So I haven't seen it happening with a pageant as such, unless the pageant is shippy.
I think it might be something. I mean, I don't know, Tracey, I don't know as much as you do about the structure of these things in period, but it might simply be stabilization for a large sort of stage structure, possibly a backdrop, but we'll see. I guess we haven't, read the description yet of what the pageant looks like.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's related to the setting up the pageant in the hall and the frame and the gallery bit just above. The Merchant Taylor's Hall still does, of course, has a kind of viewing gallery along the top end of the Great Hall. So clearly it was kind of set up there in some way.
Yes, it's as opposed to whatever's happening at St Paul's. So it's this question of what is this? Is this referring to after the fact? Does the pageant get placed there mid-show, as it were, once the main show is done? Do they carry it down and hang it up somewhere? How does that function? There's lots of other details here. They spend an awful lot on gunpowder and ordnance, don't they?
Yeah, I assumed that was just because it was expensive, rather than because there's I don't know.
Well, the foist is the boat, so that would be the bulk of it, I suspect. The galley foist, which is the kind of small vessel covered in cannons and guns and things.
Because that's 45 quid, plus also £10 for gunshot on land as well. So that's 55 plus for the mechanics of exploding things.
For pyros, basically, for pyros.
But I have a question. When it says 30 shillings to John Taylor, Master of the Children of the Late One, does that then mean that he got paid for for bringing the children to the pageant, but then the children don't actually get paid?
Yes, I think that's the system.
Okay, just double checking.
Yeah, the children don't get paid. The institution gets paid, and John Taylor in particular. The late monastery of Westminster being Westminster Abbey, right? And these were the children of the chapel who sang in the choir, and John Taylor was their choir master and general marshal.
It's certainly interesting. It shows you how kind of relatively early this is in the kind of period, the modern period, because you don't see Westminster referred to as the late monastery later on. This is still a kind of a residue of the 1530s, I guess.
Doesn't Westminster have some specific technical name? It's not actually called Westminster Abbey, and which reflects its original
Probably.
thing. I think there's a thing. I recall on that, but I don't know what it is.
It's not the city I know much about. It's the other one.
So yeah, we have that earlier reference: 2 shillings 4pence to porters for setting up the pageant in the hall, in the frame, in the gallery. So again, it's this indoor context for the pageant, as opposed to an outdoor one that I'm curious about. What else do we have? Harps, children playing, 5 harps, and his child.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about the mummer, John Holt mummer, in reward for attendance given to the children of the pageant. What does that mean?
I had assumed that it meant basically like he was the movement specialist or something, whereas the master of the children was basically sort of the choir master, as Liza said. I don't know if that's like accurate, but I'm just sort of hypothesizing.
No, that's sort of what we're here for. We're to sort of see how it all sort of holds together, and then we have John Shute. I think the C should actually be an H there. The painter. So again, we've got the painting and decorating side, making everything look fabulous. We've got the design is by George Cable. Drawing a pattern of a pageant. He's doing the design work. He's doing what Christmas does. Many years later. I'm just trying to do some internal maths. Quite a long, 60 years later. Any other thoughts before we move into the first-hand account? Tom, then Eric.
Just the general. How does this translate into today's monetary?
So that's for the 1560s. That's quite expensive. That's probably, those of you who are better at maths than me probably worked out that is actually more than the amount of money in those entries. There's more expenditure, a lot more expenditure. But yeah, it's the 1613, if I remember rightly, it was about £600, and that was the most expensive in the whole early modern period. So they're splashing out a little bit. I think the pageant was completely new, which might explain it, because there's a kind of suggestion in the manuscript that they'd previously reused one, but in this instance they kind of had a new one.
But off the top of my head, I don't know what the calculation for what it might be like today, and certainly not for the 1561. I mean, it's doing the maths on that. I'm sure there's an online calculator.
There is, and I'm just looking it up.
Excellent. We'll go to Eric while you're doing that. Eric.
My question is basically like, what are the regals and what does trimming the regals mean?
Liza.
Liza will know.
Liza.
I think that what it means is I mean we'll see as we read, but I think that there are people who represent kings, because I think the 12 shillings and sixpence to Mr. Shobman, I don't know, but I would guess that Mr. Shobman is on costumes. And so they've made a crown for David, who I guess is King David, because they've got lots of harps. So I'm guessing King David playing the harp is going to appear at some point. So trimming the regals might be dressing the royal personages as they're represented in the pageant.
Oh, well, a regal is an organ, it's a portable organ.
Yes, that's a regal. It makes a noise like.
Well, they use them in performances in every company halls around it at this time. So I think they're probably decorating it, because trimming usually means decorating.
Well, it does, but are there going to be that? I wouldn't see. I don't see how you would need more than two of them. They make an almighty noise.
I mean, I've only ever seen it referred to in the plural, so I'm assuming it's like that's just how they always said regals rather than regal. So like bellows rather than bellow, that's the kind of that. But that was my interpretation of it.
Yes, but it's the juxtaposition with crown there, crown for David. Maybe that it's actually a costuming rather than a music thing. Because I leapt to music, but it's a good point. It might not be that, and I haven't quite figured out who Master Shobman is.
Look into. I've looked at the currency calculator, and it's approximately £35,000.
Woo!
That's cheap at twice the price.
It can buy you 31 horses or 120 cows.
No cow. Okay.
I mean, I guess we'll see as we read.
Yes, we do need to read. So what we've got is a first-hand account from Henry Matchin. In fact, we're actually going to start in September because there is some sort of background material that we'll throw in, and it's quite fun. His writing style is not very easy to follow, and there may be some additional modernisation or adjustments that need to be made. So do your best. The numbers are rendered in English, but I've occasionally kept the original number in square brackets next to it, just in case I've got my maths wrong with the Roman numerals. You don't have to say the number twice. I'll ask Anna Rose and Olga to alternate on this one for a little bit before we swap round. I'll start. Olga, could you start first with the 29th and see what happens?
The 29th day of September was new mayor elected Master Harper, merchant tailor, on Michaelmas Day.
The 30th day of September, my Lord Mayor and the aldermen and the new sheriffs took their barges at the Three Cranes in Vintrer, and so to Westminster, and so into the Chequer, and there took their oath. And Sir Rowland Hill went up, and Master Hodges took Sir Rowland Hill a chopping knife, and one did hold a white rod, and he with the knife cut the rod in sunder for all the people. And after to London to their places to dinner, my Lord Mayor and all the aldermen and many worshipful men.
The first day of October was a fire wet in the Tower of London, beyond the White Tower.
The 3rd day of October came to London, to Gracechurch Street, to the Cross Keys, 18 great horses, all pied-coloured, from the King of Swatheland.
The 4th day of October came to Woolwich from Swatheland 2 ships laden with...
Nobody's really sure.
The 10th day of October, the Queen's Grace did great cost at Westminster, both within here place, and paving from the end of the tilt round about the sides, and closed in the tilt.
The 12th day of October did preach at Paul's Cross, Master Crawley, sometime a book printer dwelling in Holborn, in the Bishop of Ely's rents.
The 25th day of October came riding from Scotland certain Frenchmen through London. My Lord of Bedford and my Lord Monge and my Lord Strange was their guide, with a horse through Fleet Street, and so to my Lord of Bedford's.
The same time was dealt through all the wards of London 12 pence, a house for Sir Rowland Hill, late Mayor of London, being very sick that time. The same day, about 3 at afternoon, came my Lord of Bradford, and my Lord Monge and my Lord Strange, and many other gentlemen, and many of the pensioners to my Lord of Bradford's place, and brought the ambassadors of France to the court that lie there at my Lord's place.
The 28th day of October, the which was St. Simon and Jude Day, was at Whitehall, great baiting of the bull and bear for the ambassadors of France that came out of Scotland, the which the Queen's Grace was there, and her council, and many noble men. The 28th day of October at 12 of the clock, at midnight died good Sir Rowland Hill, knight and late mayor of this noble city of London, and Mercer, the which he died of the strangery.
And which is an unpleasant urinary condition. I brought all this detail in because there's sort of this interesting question about the condition of Sir Rowland Hill. Was he literally the previous Lord Mayor? Because it seems like they've almost done that reference to the 30th day of September seems slightly odd what was going on there, and I was wondering whether he's really unwell. Shall we make sure we get something in, some ceremony in before he dies? I'm not quite sure what was going on. Whether some of the days are out of order and something could be something else there. There's a lot of detail in there, what I found very interesting. Liza.
When people think in this period, Tracey, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but in this period, when people think they're about to die, they give alms to the poor to try and cleanse their soul, if you will, and make amends. The giving of alms, in general, it accompanies quite a lot of state occasions. It's sort of a holdover from the Catholic traditions where you would pay for masses to be sung, but I think it's just the giving of alms to the poor.
Yeah, it's the 30th day of September. It's the barges go at the Three Cranes in Vintry and so to Westminster. It's sort of, it seems like it's everything's a month early, and I was wondering if am I missing something there, Tracy?
Okay. It's the election.
Oh, that's just the election. They do a whole chopping knife with a
October.
white broad thing.
Yeah, the 29th of October. I've never seen that before, but the 29th of October is the inauguration. The Michaelmas ceremony is the election.
Mm.
So there's a month where the kind of sort of a handover takes place, where basically the new Lord Mayor has been elected but hasn't yet taken up his role.
Mm.
That's what happens in October.
You say so, yeah. So the 29th, I was sort of expecting. It was the 30th day of September. That I'm just wondering if is that mislabeled, or is that part, because that's the sort of ceremonial thing I was expecting to happen on the 29th of October.
Yeah, I'm very. I'm afraid I'm a bit sketchy about the ceremonial associated with the election. I haven't seen the breaking the rod thing before, but I suspect that probably is just what would happen. I need to look maybe at some of Mackin's other entries for other dates and see if it happens again. Yeah. I mean, at least he hung on till
Yeah.
the last minute.
Well, I'd say that's what I was sort of wondering, whether they deliberately sort of did an element of the ceremony early because he wasn't very well, and as it happened, they were wise to do so.
Possible. I mean, there's a number of Lord Mayors died during their term of office, and were kind of, somebody else took over and had to get into their own sort of ceremoniette. So I'm not altogether sure. Interesting, very interesting.
Eric, were you waving? No. Yes.
Yeah. I was just wondering because like this basically sounds like they're kind of cutting up something so that they can vote, which is. I don't know, because kind of like how you would cut like straws or something into or whatever. But maybe that's just me.
I was wondering if it's sort of the ceremonially ending the previous person's term by cutting their rod, and the breaking of the staff. It's like your term is now done. Maybe it's a pre-ceremony thing that they do to say your office is coming to an end. We're going to, however, now get to the actual Lord Mayor show. We're going to get to the. I know the anticipation is killing you. Let's actually do it. So I'm going to ask Liza to read the last account of the 29th day. I'll ask Tom if you could read David. I will ask Olga to be Orpheus, Eric to be Amphion. Anna Rose to be Arion, and Liza, if you could be Topaz, and I think that gets us around everybody there. So David is Tom, Orpheus Olga, Amphion Eric, Arion Anna Rose, and Topaz Liza, and Liza starts us off. With what you've got there.
The 29th day of October, the new mayor took his barge towards Westminster, my new Lord Mayor, Master Harper, with the aldermen in their scarlet and all the crafts of London in their livery, and their barges with their banners and streamers of every occupation's arms. And there was a goodly foist made with streamers, targets, and banners, and arms, and great shooting of guns, and trumpets blowing. And at 12 o'clock, my Lord Mayor and the aldermen landed at Paul's Wharf, and so to Paul's churchyard, and there met him a pageant, gloriously made, with children with diverse instruments playing and singing, and afternoon to Paul's with trumpets. And there were a Roman numeral number that we don't have. There were a number of men in blue gowns and capes and hose and blue satin sleeves, with targets and shields of arms.
The heavy hand of God to mercy wilt thou turn, unmollified man's heart, when it with rage does burn. Then fall to psalm and harp, for so I, David, won the favour both of God and Saul, that furious man.
Ooh,
Got some intro.
Oh, there you are, Olga. We lost you for a moment.
Sorry. Yeah.
Your cue for Orpheus has come.
Yeah. If rivers could speak, which they did oft times hear, when they to Orpheus' harp did give attentive ear, then should you understand how great a joy it were our harper in this town the sword of power to bear.
What harp can understand? What harp can heart withstand to whom the stones relent? For while Amphion played upon this instrument, they as unto the harp bound and obedient to build the wall of Thebes without man's handling went.
The harp then pierceth heaven, the harp the earth can move, and that it ruleth the sea, Arion can well prove, whom on her back by sea a dolphin safe did save, and therefore did no higher, but song on his harp crave.
When wisdom reigned most and virtue ruled all, then learning, cunning, wit in every prince's hall were uttered at the harp, for so the Trojan knight Topaz did delight with sound of harp all night.
And yet we harpers all no rigorous did use, but God the gentle sound of harp did not refuse. The calm and quiet note the violent soul did stay, his rage and boiling breast my mild harp did delay.
The stones no force did feel, the streams no sturdy heap, the dolphin feared no bit, nor for no spur did leap.
The prince and the ancient men did think the harp must meet to open them their high affairs when they did sit at meat.
For while your gentle harper may with mildness bring about as much touching gooing government as they that be right stout. Wherefore rejoice ye Londoners, and hope well of your mayor, for never did a milder man sit on the chiefest chair.
On the top, as a fan, the arms of the Lord Mayor-elect on the one side thereof, and the arms of the merchant tailors on the other side thereof. Under in the midst, David with his story about him. On the right side, Orpheus with his story before. On the left, Amphion with his story. On the left side, at the end, Arion story. On the right side at the end, Topaz with his story. Orpheus playing on his harp, and trees, rivers, mountains as dancing and hearkening. Amphion so with a city and the wall, a building and the stones as voluntary running to it. Arion sitting on a dolphin in the sea, playing on the harp. Topaz so before a table of princes, and every one of them to have his posy, in all places of the pageant to have painted the verses of Psalm 150. So we've got a dolphin! We've got an animal! That's what we're here for. We've got one animal. We've got some other imagery going on there. And we have a explanation as to why there are 5 harps. We have the context of the harps, as mentioned in the accounts. So, yeah, we've got the idea of the imagery that these painters are painting and going for. We've got an idea what's going on there. Thoughts in the room on that? As much touching good government. There was a slight typo there. Apologies. Yeah, any thoughts on this beyond? Yay, we've got a dolphin. Liza.
Okay, so as Eric pointed out in the chat, we have a new mayor named William Harper, and so they've hired 5 harps, and they have the personages of historical famous harpers harping on them, both Christian and pagan. We've got David, and we've got Orpheus, and we've got Arion, and we've got Amphion, the builder of Thebes, and through all this we've got a theme of the harp that makes other people and creatures and things do things for joy rather than by force, and there's praise of William Harper as a mild man. So That's kind of lovely. It must have been a nice a nice scene. And I like the descriptions of the little, I assume, painted or figured scenes around each person, each harper.
Yeah, and I say this is part of an ongoing tradition of terrible puns being the central thesis for your pageants. We will have web later on. What does he gets a web? It's imagery is played around with, and just a note, additional typo that it's Eopaz rather than topaz. It's a Trojan knight called Eopaz, not topaz. That's a simple transcription.
So probably pronounced Iopus?
Or something along those lines, yes. Other thoughts?
We don't know who wrote those verses. Obviously, we do know with the 1568 it was Mulcaster. It might have been him. It might be a bit early. It might have been James Peel. Might be a bit early for him, but yeah, it's annoying not to know, because given that you know the name of the porter and a lot of other things that who cares about poets? They're not important. Yeah, possibly Mulcaster.
Okay, well, we don't have any more explicit description of this Lord Mayor show, but we do have a little bit more from Machin, which follows on from the death of the previous Lord Mayors, and I thought we'd stick with that. I'll ask Liza to read the first little bit. It's a bit fiddly, and then Anna Rose, could you read the 5th day of November down to the penultimate last two lines, which I will jump in and nab.
So I'm reading the psalm?
No, skipping the psalm. The painted verses of Psalm 150. Feel free to Google the words at home.
It's the one that commands you to praise the Lord with the psaltery and harp. That's the salient bit.
Yes, more harps and a cat coming into view on camera over there.
So Henry Machin says, the 1st day of November went to St. Paul's the Lord Mayor and the aldermen at afternoon, and all the crafts of London in their livery, and with...
I couldn't decide what number it was trying to be.
I think it's 5 and 20.
5 and 20? Let's go with that.
Or possibly 4 and 20. Can't count the eyes. 4 and 20.
Yeah, I went with 24 or 16, depending on how you wanted to do it.
There were I think 4 and 20 men all carrying of torches, and my Lord Mayor tarried until night, and so went home with all torches lighted. For my Lord Mayor tarried the sermon, my Lord of London made the sermon, but it was late, and so their torches was light to bring my lord home.
The 5th day of November was buried in St. Stephen's in Walbrook Sir Rowland Hill, late Mayor and Alderman and Mercer and Knight, with a standard and 5 pennons of arms, a coat, armour, and a helmet, a crest, sword, and mantle, and 11 dozen of scutcheons of arms. And he gave 100 gowns and coats to my men and women. And there were 2 heralds of arms, Master Clarenchukes and Master Somerset, and my Lord Mayor Mourner, the chief mourner, Sir Richard Lee, Master Corbett, with divers other mourners, Sir William Caudle, Sir Thomas Offaly, Sir Martin's Bowes, and Master Chamberlain Alderman, and the 2 sheriffs, and Master Chamber, and Master Blakewell, with many more mourners, and 50 poor men in good black gowns, beside women. And the Dean of Paul's made the sermon. And after all done, my Lord Mayor and many an alderman went to the Mercer's Hall, and the craft to dinner, and the residue to his place to dinner, and great moan made for his death, and he gave much to the poor.
And on the same day was whipped at Queen's Hive at a post a waterman for opprobrious words and seditious words against the magistrates. There is a lot more of that kind of detail from Machin, but I thought it was fair that we found out how Sir Rowland Hill was mourned and buried, and quite impressively. Lots of the great and the good, and they all then went to dinner and gave much to the poor. So, They said he was a good guy. They said he was a good guy. They seem to genuinely mourn him. I don't know. There's no mention here of him just going, well, we just went for the food. They seem to genuinely do. Any final thoughts on 1561 that anyone wants to throw in before we dive into 1568? Before time does that and we jump forward 7 years. Eric?
I'm just curious about because we had this description about Roland Hill and so on, but I just want to go back to the part that was on the water. They had like a sort of sea fight. Is that what happened? Sea fight. I don't or is that just me misunderstanding?
I don't recall a sea fight.
Because all the crofts of London in their livery and their barges with their banners and streamers of every occupation's arms, and there was a goodly foist made with streamers, targets, banners, arms, and the great shooting of guns and trumpets blowing.
Yeah, I think that's more just the general banging and clamouring that the barges make on their way to Westminster. I could be wrong. Tracey?
That's right. The foist is there to sort of, set off cannon and stuff and generally make a bracket. So it's not. I get the impression with this one, as much as you get much information about the actual pageantry, that there with Amphion and the Dolphin was the only sort of element of the water show. That said, of course, people would have probably had a lot of fun listening to the cannons going off, and there may well have been some, impromptu stuff that we don't necessarily know about anymore. There was certainly they employed fencers and long swordsmen in other instances, so they may well have been there as well. I've just looked through the rest of the accounts, but I can't find anything, fortunately.
Yeah.
Because as I say, we've got this pageant outside in Paul's churchyard, but we still have this reference in the accounts of the pageant which is tied up to rafters of the hall, and I'm just seeing, once the show is over, there's a dolphin up in the roof for a while, because it's a dolphin and it's cool, and some of the other things. That said, it is possible, I suppose, that Paul's churchyard does contain quite a lot of oddments and things where you might be able to connect and hang things from, but it's the way it's described is an indoor space with those shillings and pence that they're spending on it. So that's a curiosity which I don't know if we have a proper answer for, but maybe one day we will. Any other thoughts before we move into 1568?
Just briefly, I know we've talked about the pun on the names, but I just wanted to say I was thinking about that, and I can imagine, how pleased they must have been, like, of all the names the mayor could have had, and then he comes with Harper. It's a golden opportunity to get out the harps. So I just thought there must have been a really human side behind that pun, where they were just like having the time of their lives with harps and dolphins, and like of all the surnames he could have had.
Yeah, let's say there will be more terrible puns in the future. I'm trying to think of a few more off the top of my head. There's definitely some really, really terrible gags that they really lean into, and I'm struggling to think of some more, but there definitely were some.
There's John Lehman and the Lemon Tree. That's a Monday. That's pretty lame. Campbell, Campbell, Fairfield.
Yeah.
We didn't get like the huge history though, where they usually go. Like usually they have like a whole structure of London greeting the new Lord Mayor and sort of the older, aka ghosts of previous mayors, sort of saluting the new Lord Mayor. I don't know. Maybe this wasn't a full form just yet.
No, it's much more scant in this period. Even when you get to Peel in the 80s, there's only one pageant and a handful of speeches.
Yes, and but we may have it in the imagery. Amphion so with a city and the wall, so it might be that there is a visual depiction of London there. But yeah, that we don't have London literally saluting, as it were. Okay, well, I say time warp. We're jumping forward a few years. It's 1568. It's still the same day because it's pretty much always the 29th of October, unless it's a Sunday, in which case it's not. I don't actually have a note that what day of the week this one is, but I can check that in a moment as I swap books from in front of me. But we've got an incoming Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Roe. Oh, God, are we going to have fish jokes?
We've got a deer, a roe deer. Come on.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay. Okay, so who was Sir Thomas Roe? Merchant Taylor.
Another merchant tailor, yes. He was president of St Thomas's Hospital. He had 11 children. His son was Lord Mayor in 1607. So that's kind of quite common with these families, all kind of intermarrying. They sort of run things, really. He died just under a year after the end of his term of office. And he was buried in Hackney.
Fair enough. It was a Friday. No, not a Friday. No, it wasn't. Hang on. Yeah, it was Friday. Friday, 29th of October. There we are. So it's always important to know what day of the week it was. Makes a difference. We don't have very much for this one. We do know that the speeches for the pageant are by Richard Mulcaster, as we said before. And so, yeah, we're going to just go around the room and assign. There are 4 boys and a St. John. So, seem to have lost Liza. I'll ask Eric, could you be St. John? And Tom, if you can be first boy. Olga, second boy. Anna Rose, third boy. And I'll be the fourth boy. Why not? Let's do it that way. Okay, so the speeches for the pageant to be made against the Right Worshipful Master Thomas Roe, Alderman, Lord Mayor-elect, shall take his oath.
I am that voice in the wilderness, which once the Jews did call, and now again am sent from God to preach unto you all. Repent, and make the Lord's way straight, let works your will bewray. The time of your account is come. Amend your lives, I say. The axe is already in hand to hew down every tree, which doth not bear so pleasant fruit, as God would it should be.
Behold the roe, the swift in chase, yet stayeth still to hear. As soon as John began to speak, the roe did yield his ear. Though wild in wood, yet mild to man, and listening to his sound, and chiefly as you now behold, when God thereof is ground.
The roe is swift, and yet can stay. No beast is swift so soon, whose gall for health by special note in aught hath won renown. Our roe by wit is swift as wind, and yet with pitch of stay, whose gall, when as offenders move, for justice maketh way.
The roe as he himself in sight all other doth excel, so doth he help with present aid all such as see not well. Our roe by sight in government we trust shall rule so well, that by his doings such may learn as covet to excel.
God save our queen, our maiden prince, whom he hath set in place, that John may preach, that Roe may hear the gift of heavenly grace. The court forbade John once to speak, a maiden made the mean. The court now bid John Baptist preach, under our maiden queen. God send her life and honour long, her royal crown to wear. God send us such as John to preach, and such as Roe to hear. We'll just briefly pause there before we do the last little bit of text we've got on this. Yeah, John and Roe, and do we think we're going to have some deer? I'm hoping some visual representation of deer here. I'll be very disappointed if there are no deer. I have a note here from other accounts of that there are 48 birds and 4 rabbits. From a note that I've got from Wiggins. But as of yet, I'm not sure that they what connection they have with the text we've just read. So I don't know there. Okay, we have some precepts. These verses or precepts will be written about the pageant if it shall be good. Eric, you like precepts. Read a few of them.
I'm guessing this is the if cares as opposed to the fear God, be wise, be true, that bit.
Yes, if cares of wisdom's learned skill.
Okay.
Go from there.
If cares of wisdom's learned skill, if fear of God to do his will, if right of law and true justice, if hate of bribes and avarice, if these you print in memory, if these you practice faithfully, then God doth guide you certainly. Then God will bless your mayoralty.
These verses above recited were not written about the pageant, nor in no place else at that time. I'm not quite sure how to deal with that particular contradiction, but never mind. John Holt, Richard Tidsdale and Robert Pavey are appointed to give their attendance for the oversight of the pageant whilst it is a painting and a making. 8 persons are appointed to see that the pageant is not carried against penthouses and to keep people from thrusting upon it, and to see it safely brought to this house at night. John Stow is one of the 30 whifflers appointed. Master Mulcaster's name is included in the list of those who are to have gowns. Lots of nice detail there. Tracy?
We're thrilled to hear that as well as a lot of birds, 4 dozen birds, we also have 4 rabbits, which cost 11 pence.
11 pence each, or in total?
No, I'd like to think they were alive rather than dead rabbits. I don't say.
I love the fact there are 8 persons who are appointed to make sure the pageant doesn't get caught on any buildings. Because these are things that the people are carrying around. These are movable structures, and to keep people from thrusting upon it as well. I have this image of people thrusting upon it.
Go around and take sort of signage down.
Yeah.
Have kind of overhang. So yeah, it would have been. You can imagine the claim to compensation if your bloody pageant just knocked my sign off.
And as I said, John Stow is one of the 30 whifflers, and whifflers are the street crowd control with sticks who tell you to get out of the way. We got names, and it's. I like Master Mulcaster as well, having written the words. He's you can have a gown. That's all right. Yeah, you can.
Well, wait. Have we talked about Mulcaster yet?
We have not. Liza, welcome back.
Hi. So Mulcaster was the master of a troop of boys, wasn't he?
Yep. Merchant Taylor's School.
So presumably he will have been the director, as it were, of the kids who did the pageant?
Yes. Well, yes, and he was involved in a few things, actually. I think he had some involvement in Elizabeth's coronation pageantry too. He was quite an important figure in that period. The boys would probably have known him because they would have been from his school, which might have helped, actually, I guess. Yeah.
I do like how they kind of backtracked in the sort of using the 4th boy. They kind of went, the court forbade John once to speak. A maiden made the mean. But hey, come on, we've now got like a new queen, so it's fine. It's like, just didn't write that very well, did you?
Well, are they explicitly referencing Mary as previously? And is that a deliberate? It's a slightly odd. The 4th boy is totally out of, because it's just God Save the Queen. It's a very, very odd little bit of back and forth, and it's slightly different from the rest of it. Liza?
I'm wondering if it's Herod's court and if the maiden is Salome.
Yeah, but I was thinking,
but it would be kind of an impolitic comparison with Elizabeth.
Well, they do say Elizabeth is different. It's a different court. He's allowed to speak at court because she's a good queen who does these things right.
Maiden prince.
It was just such an awkward backpedaling moment of like, shit, don't talk about that. That's how it felt. But I mean, obviously, if you wrote it, you would have thought about the actual words that you're saying. So maybe.
Right, it's not the first time that Lord Mayor shows have occasionally included material that wasn't politic to do.
Yeah, true.
Any additional thoughts on 1568 then? And not a lot to pass here. Eric?
Yeah, the bit that got me off guard was St. John at the beginning, because obviously, I had no idea how it relates to Rome. as opposed to like the rest of the, because all the other ones just have like the pun
He's the
in
patron saint of the company.
Oh, that would make sense.
Is there a story to do with him and Deer that I'm presumably apocryphal story? I don't recall it being biblical, but
Don't think so. I'm not very good on religious stuff, but I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's just there because it's the Merchant Taylor's Saint.
Yeah.
It just felt so out of like, I am the voice of, I don't know, in the middle of the nowhere. But hey.
Well, John is the voice in the wilderness, calling out. So, yeah, it's his thing, really. Any other thoughts on 1568 before I close this session? So yeah, they are simpler. They're smaller scale things to what the Lord Mayor Show will become. But there's a lot of continuity here as well. There's the same kind of pageantry. The boats are still banging. There's lots of display, even if the pageant itself is only necessarily one station and relatively self-contained. There's going to be certainly a lot more mission creep as we creep to the end of the century and into the 17th century, when the bling really starts to be put in place. We've gone on a little longer than I had planned, but it was good stuff. I'm sure if you're interested in more civic pageantry, we have a whole host of videos on every other Lord Mayor show. We have gone through them all at least once, and some of them more than once, and some of them we work towards doing more detailed performances and productions on the podcast, and occasionally even in the real world. If you're interested in that, there will be links in the show description. And there'll be even possibly a little box in the corner saying, here are civic pageantry stuff. So you can always go to that if you want to. Any other final thoughts before I press stop on this recording? No. Well, all that remains to thank all the wonderful readers for their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.